me as well.
Right. I have to ask, really, before we move on too much, I think most people probably know you from Halloween 6. Maybe a little less now, but
It'll never go. Producers, that's for sure.
Yeah. With the producer's cut having now come out, what is kind of your opinion on that?
Well, listen, I mean, they're two distinctly, connected but different movies. I'm glad that our friends at Screen Factory, had the resources and desire to, track down all those elements and put it out in a really classy way. I mean, it's like that movie is, I kind of looked at it with new eyes. I'd forgotten, how differently the producer's cut had been color timed and how the sound was so different and the music certainly was so different. There were just so many elements of it that I'd forgotten how that one played. So it was kind of refreshing in a way to watch it after all these years. Sans the 20th generation bootleg that has been circulating all the conventions and all that. But I think it's almost. I've said this a few times, but I feel like with the whole Halloween series, it's become kind of like choose your own adventure or your own horror story. I mean, it's kind of like which road do you want to take? And it's interesting with our movie is like I said, it's a very there's that version, and then there's the version that was the theatrically released one, and they're two so different, takes on the same theme, if you will, that it's, I guess, I don't necessarily can't say one is better than the other or one this, I think there's interesting things about both of them. I as the writer, I just never felt like, I still don't feel like the real story, the script was never really done. There were so many cuts and so many changes made, during the production that for me, it just never felt like a finished movie either way. So, that being said, I'm glad that, the other version's, legitimately out there now. And I think, it's cool to see it have a second life, or a third or fourth at this point. So, yeah.
Well, I completely agree on all that. Actually, this last October, we did a Halloween retrospective, and we actually had to do both cuts of the film separately because they are so different. And I agree with what you said because I have been able to read one version of the script, and it's the only produced script that I've actually read in, I believe, the last decade, just because I feel it's better to watch the film. But the version that I read was absolutely phenomenal, and I have to say, it's easily one of the best scripts I've ever read.
Oh, that's really kind. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, listen, I was I was young when I wrote that. I was 24, I think. So, believe me when I say that I was and am, thrilled that is a part of my, film legacy, if you want to call it that, or film resume. And I would never take that back, and, the movie certainly got its critics, but what's nice to me and what sort of fills my heart in a way is that so many fans have kind of taken another look at it and kind of begun to appreciate at least where we were going with that one. And, I have to, to toot our own horn. I mean, I personally think there's some moments, not overall, but I think there's some really shining moments in Halloween 6 that I think surpass, I don't want to get egotistical, but I think surpass anything that kind of came after. I think some of the cinematography is great. I think that fall, very authentic, autumn feeling that we had, because it really was, when we shot it. And you know what? We had Donald Pleasence, and I love that we did, and I love that was his last contribution to the series, and that we had him on set, and I get to meet him, and I get to write those lines for him, and so all of that just holds very special memories for me.
Oh, it's completely understandable. I mean, my co-host, Michael, it's his favorite film, and I have to say it's probably one of my top 3, at least the producer's cut, because you're right, it does have that authentic feel and everything to it. It ties so much back to the original.
we tried, and I think, it's always the goal. I think even with the most recent one, I think they, really endeavored to tie it back to the original film. They called it a sequel to the original film. In fact, it didn't even have its own title. It's always, every time anyone approaches a Halloween sequel, it's always the mandate is always, the original movie, that's what everybody says. You're never going to make the original movie because the original movie is the original movie, and I feel like it's always like you're chasing like lightning in a bottle with these things. You can't replicate that. But, I think all of us really went at it with the right heart. I remember Paul Rudd was over the moon to be in this movie, and we had a lot of fun together, and I think it meant even more to him when he found out that I was such a super fan of the series, and suddenly, like, it became a whole different experience for Paul when he found out, like, I was that, fan, really, that they kind of pointed to and gave me the opportunity. So I think for him, it became more like, oh my God, we really have to make this good now, So, he was really a champion of the project, and I think that's why he felt like me. I mean, I think he felt let down, and hurt that the studio went in and kind of, pardon the pun, but slashed the movie, to ribbons in a way. So, I think if Paul has a bad taste in his mouth over that, it's the same bad taste that we all had, which was like, what are they doing? This is not what we signed up to do. So I think that's, I think he and I were certainly on the same page through the whole making of it. And, listen, but I think, we're all young, we're all starting our careers, and, he's a superstar now, and it's just really cool, to see, that, we were all at the beginning. Look back at that movie, I kind of chuckle now, but it was a cool time. We were just a bunch of kids, getting to make this movie, and listen, I couldn't have had, a more perfect introduction to the movie industry, but also to the horror genre. It's like getting the brass ring the first time out. For me, it was. Some people might go, "Oh, brother, aim higher." But I mean, it meant everything to me, and so there'll always be a special place in my heart for the series, but also for that particular movie. For all its little things and misfires. It just it was a special time for everybody.
And I completely get that. It's definitely a very special film. But you mentioned being a kid.